On April 3, 1996, in Lincoln, Montana, the FBI arrested a man named Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, America's most wanted criminal, a serial bomber who had killed and wounded targets across the country for 17 years, with no clear connection between victims.
Pat Webb and I, who had worked on this for so many years, just sort of looked at each other and realized that maybe this was the beginning of the end, that we really did believe that night, if we hadn't believed before, that we had in fact caught the Unabomber.
For nearly 2 decades, he had eluded the FBI. It was the largest, most expensive manhunt in the Bureau's history. He was the evil genius they couldn't catch, likely the most intellectual serial killer in American history. He had terrorized the nation, making people afraid to open their mail, afraid to board planes, and he had done all of it from this cabin. This is where he built his bombs. This is where he wrote his manifesto. This is where he evaded capture for nearly 2 decades. It is where an isolated man became a serial bomber, known around the world. Ted was born on May 22, 1942, in Evergreen Park, a working-class suburb on the south side of Chicago. His father worked in a sausage factory. His mother was a homemaker who later became a school teacher. They were a Polish-American family with no particular wealth and a very high regard for education. Ted showed unusual intellectual ability early. By elementary school, his teachers recognized that he was processing information at a level far beyond his classmates. He skipped the 6th grade. He later skipped the 11th. By the time most children his age were finishing junior high school, he was preparing college applications. His IQ has been reported at approximately 167. For reference, that places him in a category that affects roughly 1 in a million people. In September 1958, at the age of 16, he enrolled at Harvard University on a full academic scholarship. He was among the youngest students on campus. Harvard should have been the place where Ted found his people, other students who thought the way he did, who read what he read, who cared about what he cared about. By most accounts, it was not. His dormitory neighbors found him strange and withdrawn. He had no close friends. He studied, alone, with an intensity that impressed his professors and left almost no room for anything else. During his sophomore year, a Harvard psychologist named Dr. Henry Murray recruited him for a personality study. Murray was not an ordinary academic. During World War II, he had worked for the OSS, the wartime intelligence agency that preceded the CIA, where he developed methods for stress testing individuals under interrogation conditions. His research had overlapping connections with government programs that would later become known under the name MK Ultra. The study that Murray conducted on Harvard undergraduates between 1959 and 1962 was described in its official materials as research into personality development. Students were asked to write detailed personal essays, their beliefs, their values, their deepest convictions about the world. They were told these essays would be studied. Then they were brought, one at a time, into a room, wired to physiological monitoring equipment, seated under bright lights, and filmed through a one-way mirror. Trained interrogators used the contents of their essays to attack them, personally, directly, and without restraint. Murray himself described the sessions as vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive. Ted participated in these sessions for 3 years. He was 17 years old when they began. He later described the Murray experiment as the worst experience of his life. Whether those sessions caused what came next is a question that cannot be answered with certainty. What can be said is this: a 17-year-old boy, already isolated, already forming a worldview that set him apart from almost everyone around him, spent 3 years watching that worldview systematically dismantled by institutional authority inside the walls of the most prestigious university in the country. He graduated from Harvard in 1962, at the age of 20, with a degree in mathematics. From Harvard, Ted went to the University of Michigan, where he earned a master's degree and then a doctorate in mathematics. His dissertation solved a problem so difficult that his committee chair later said it was among the most impressive pieces of work he had ever reviewed. the mathematics department awarded it the top prize for the year. In 1967, at 25 years old, he joined the faculty of the University of California, Berkeley as an assistant professor. By any measure, this was a remarkable achievement. In June 1969, he submitted a letter of resignation to the university. He gave no explanation. He did not negotiate a transition. He simply stopped coming. For a time, he returned to his parents' home in Illinois. He said little about what he intended to do. His family knew he had developed a deep hostility toward modern society, toward technology, toward industry, toward the direction he believed the world was moving. He had begun writing about these ideas privately in notebooks that he kept to himself. In 1971, Ted and his brother David purchased a small parcel of land outside Lincoln, Montana, a rural town with a population of a few hundred people, set in Lewis and Clark County, surrounded by mountains and wilderness. The two brothers built a small structure on the property by hand, one room, roughly 10 by 12 feet, no power, no phone, no running water, a wood stove, a single window. David eventually returned to the outside world. Ted did not. He grew some of his own food. He hunted. He rode a bicycle into Lincoln when he needed supplies. He read classical texts in their original languages, and he wrote, constantly, privately, in the notebooks that filled his shelves year by year. The world continued without him. Technology continued advancing. Roads were built near his land. Development spread toward the wilderness he had chosen specifically because it was empty. He had already concluded that industrial society was not simply flawed, but fundamentally incompatible with human freedom, and that it could not be reformed. It could only be destroyed. He spent years building that argument on paper. Eventually, he decided to do something else with his hands. On May 25, 1978, a package was left in a parking lot at the University of Illinois, Chicago. A security officer named Terry Marker picked it up and opened it. The device inside detonated. Marker was injured, but survived. It was the first bomb Ted Kaczynski ever sent. Kaczynski wrote in his journal that he had hoped a student would open it. He wrote that he hoped it would blow the student's hands off, or kill him. And then he wrote, "I am proud of what I did." The following year, on November 15, 1979, a device was placed in the cargo hold of American Airlines Flight 444, traveling from Chicago to Washington, D.C. It began to smoke at 30,000 feet. The pilot made an emergency landing. The plane came down. The bomb had not fully detonated. If it had functioned as designed, the aircraft would not have survived. Kaczynski wrote, "Unfortunately, plane not destroyed, bomb too weak. I will try again if I can get a better explosive. At least it gave them a good scare." The near destruction of a commercial aircraft forced a response. Federal investigators from the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and the United States Postal Inspection Service joined together under a single task force. They gave the case a code name drawn from the targets: universities, airlines, Unabomber. The investigation that would carry that name would remain open for 17 years. Between 1980 and 1985, he sent multiple bombs to universities and businesses across the country, targeting professors, executives, and computer professionals in Chicago, Nashville, Berkeley, Ann Arbor, and Auburn, Washington. Each device was more refined than the last. Each one left investigators with the same conclusion. The same person built all of them. Then, on December 11, 1985, a device was left in the parking lot of a computer rental store in Sacramento, California. The owner, a 38-year-old man named Hugh Scruton, walked out of his back door at around noon and picked it up. It detonated with tremendous force. The first person to reach him heard Scruton cry out, "Oh my God! Help me!" He was pronounced dead at 12:34 p.m. Hugh Scruton was the first person Ted Kaczynski killed. In his journal, Kaczynski described the result as excellent. He wrote that it was a humane way to eliminate somebody. He noted the $25,000 reward that had been offered for his capture. He wrote that he found it rather flattering. Then, on February 20th, 1987, a bomb was left in a parking lot of a computer sales company in Salt Lake City, Utah. An employee named Gary Wright picked it up, and it exploded in his face. 2 witnesses had watched a man place the device beside a car approximately 1 hour earlier. From their description, a composite sketch was produced. A white male, late 20s, blonde curly hair, aviator sunglasses, hooded sweatshirt. It was the only physical description the investigation had in 9 years of searching. And then the bombs stopped. For 6 years, nothing happened. No packages, no injuries, no deaths. The UNABOM task force continued its work. Investigators reviewed every piece of evidence again. They developed profiles. They ran down leads. They followed wrong suspects to dead ends and started over. By the early 1990s, more than 150 investigators were assigned to the case. It was the largest and most expensive domestic terrorism investigation in the history of the FBI. After 6 years of silence, Ted Kaczynski returned. Between June 1993 and April 1995, he sent 4 more bombs. 2 professors were seriously wounded. 2 men were killed. The Unabomber task force was reactivated at full force. By the summer of 1995, a manuscript had begun arriving by mail at newspaper offices across the country. The author demanded its publication. If it was published, he wrote, he would stop killing. He also threatened to blow up an airliner departing from Los Angeles before the end of the 4th of July weekend. The threat disrupted air travel along the entire West Coast. The FBI and the Department of Justice faced a decision with no good answer. Publish a terrorist's demands, or refuse and risk more deaths. They chose to publish. On September 19, 1995, the Washington Post ran the manifesto as an 8-page supplement. Approximately 3 million people read it. Linda Patrick was reading the Washington Post on a morning in the fall of 1995 when something in the text stopped her. She was reading the manifesto. She went to her husband, David Kaczynski, and told him what she thought. David said no. It was not a considered response. It was not a careful denial. It was the immediate, involuntary refusal of a man being asked to accept something that, if true, would rearrange everything he knew about his own life. He and Ted had grown up in the same house. Ted was difficult, yes. Ted was isolated and hostile and had grown stranger over the years. But this, a manifesto demanding publication under threat of murder, was not his brother. He was certain. Linda was not. She had read Ted's letters. She knew how he wrote. She knew the particular way his sentences moved, the specific arguments he returned to, the phrases that appeared in his private correspondence, and now, on the page in front of her, in a document that the FBI believed had been written by the person responsible for 16 bombings and 3 deaths.
That must have been awful for you, to have these suspicions that you're going to share with this man who you love.
Yes, but it was really important to talk with Dave about it.
When she said, well, I think maybe your brother's the Unabomber, I thought, well, this is not anything to worry about. Ted's never been violent. I've never seen him violent.
Linda's suspicions kept growing.
They had posted the first few pages of the manifesto on this screen computer in the lobby of the library. So Dave went with me, and then as Dave read the first page, I was sitting at his side and his jaw dropped.
I thought I was going to read the first page of this, turn to Linda and say, see, I told you so. But on an emotional level, it just sounded like my brother's voice.
The FBI's forensic linguists compared the manifesto against the letters David had provided. The analysis confirmed what Linda Patrick had recognized at a kitchen table months earlier, that the same person had written both. Specific grammatical patterns, recurring arguments. vocabulary choices so distinctive that their repetition across documents written years apart could not be accounted for by coincidence. A federal judge in Montana authorized a search warrant. On April 3, 1996, agents approached the cabin on Stemple Pass Road, outside Lincoln. The search moved slowly. The agents were concerned about booby traps. One agent approached Kaczynski in the clearing outside the cabin, posing as a Forest Service employee. There was a brief physical confrontation. Kaczynski was placed under arrest. He submitted to extended questioning without requesting a lawyer. Inside the cabin, the search continued for days. What investigators found confirmed what the linguistic analysis had already established, and then went far beyond it. There were bomb components on the shelves. There was a live device, fully assembled, already wrapped for mailing with a fake return address attached. A third manual typewriter, the first two found had not matched, was confirmed by the FBI laboratory to have produced the manifesto and all correspondence sent by the Unabomber since 1982. There were handwritten drafts of those same letters, and there were 40,000 pages of journals. In those journals, Kaczynski had confessed to every bombing in detail, precise enough to match the physical evidence at each scene. He had described his targets by name. He had described the devices he built. He had recorded the results. A law enforcement official told the New York Times shortly after the search began, "If we lose this one, we'd better close up and go home." They did not lose it.
We're moving people in and out of here, so y'all gotta step back. Nobody's gonna be in the way when the vehicle comes through. Please just step back.
After 17 years of looking, today FBI agents think they may have finally had a look at the Unabomber. Late this afternoon, Ted Kaczynski was taken from his backwoods cabin, leaving folks in the nearby town of Lincoln stunned.
He was just a real quiet guy. He came to town. He never bothered anybody. He never gave anybody a hard time. He was never in trouble. Never was at the bars. Just a real quiet guy. And, if you had a conversation, it was a real intelligent conversation with him. He's just not the guy that I would think would be the Unabomber.
Ted, are you the Unabomber?
Are you spoken with your family? Bye-bye.
Theodore Kaczynski was charged with 13 federal counts covering all 16 bombings. His attorneys, understanding that the evidence in the journals alone was sufficient to convict him on every charge, sought to enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. A court-ordered psychiatric evaluation produced a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Kaczynski refused the defense. He told the court that he was not insane. He was simply right. On January 22, 1998, he pleaded guilty to all 13 counts. In exchange, the government did not seek the death penalty. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences, plus 30 years. He was transferred to ADX Florence, the federal government's only supermax prison. He spent the next 23 years there, writing letters, corresponding with scholars and journalists interested in his ideas.